Oh, hello, my fellow adventurers. I didn't see you there. Last night, we had an interview with a human trafficking specialist by the name of Chris Armitage. 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 I forgot how to say his name already. I'm a bad person. This interview with Chris was very enjoyable. It was a great conversation, and it was also very informative. I was happy to bounce ideas off of him and find that a lot of my ideas about what would improve the situation around human trafficking were good ideas and accurate. And he disagreed with me on some points and gave me new perspective to think about. Overall, I think it was a really great conversation. And the only thing I regret is that I didn't have more of an audience there to ask him questions from the comments section. We were live on Twitch for the whole thing, and then we had a really great time, and we're going to have him back in the future when he puts out more books on more subjects. He has a book on gun rights planned. He has a book on law enforcement reform planned. And overall, just a really interesting guy, I think. So, without further ado, veteran, Homeland Security operative, human trafficking specialist, Chris Armitage. I hope I'm saying that right. Welcome aboard the adventure, everyone. I'm Zach. As you know, that's my Lieutenant Kate, and we have on stream as a special guest and a specialist in an interesting subject, Chris Armitage. Am I saying your last name right, sir?
Armitage is how my family says it, but I'm
Armitage.
used to people saying it other ways. Sometimes I tell people it's Armitaggy. Whatever.
He's like, sometimes I just fuck with him, you know what I mean?
The only thing my name is known for is in England. There's a urinal manufacturing company called Armitage Shanks, and that's it. I think I heard there's an anime too. So
Yeah. And there's also an actor, I think his name's Richard Armitage. I think he was like one of the dwarves in
sounds
The
pretentious.
Hobbit. Yes.
Oh, really? I'm a hobbit, so that works out.
Yeah.
The Armitage clan is manlets. It is all my uncles. I have 4 uncles, and they're all under 5'6". So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, my nickname in high school was Frodo because I'm like 5'5".
Way! Oh
Yeah,
my
I'm
gosh.
5'5", and I wear size 11 shoes, so I'm
Oh
I
my
am a
god.
hobbit.
See, I'm the polar opposite. I'm over here 6 feet, and my feet are size 9.
Very precise and dainty. I'm sorry, women can be handsome, men can be dainty. That's whatever.
I am not dainty!
Yeah, no, this guy is not dating at all.
Fair enough.
So,
We could have like a Legolas and
There you go.
Gimli thing going on. There you go.
I
All
do
right,
have the
yes.
hair to be Legolas.
He does.
Oh wait, do elves have curled hair? Is that a thing?
Yeah, that is a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want it to be, it can anyway. It's all made up anyway. In your world, heck yeah.
Fair enough. So, obviously, we're streamers, we're commentators, but my people probably don't know that much about you. Give us a quick bio in your words, sir.
Well, already anyone watching has gotten a very different side of me usually when I do interviews, which I love, by the way. I love getting to just chop it up about other things. So, Christopher Armitage, Armitage, that's, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. I served in the U.S. Air Force for almost a decade as security forces. I deployed to the Middle East twice as part of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. While I was active duty, I earned my associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees. And my undergrad is criminal justice, my master's of sciences in homeland security. I published research as part of my capstone research project on using emerging technology to combat human trafficking, which definitely starts to get very big brothery, but it was interesting stuff to do. Mm-hmm. Spun that up into a book, and that book is called Forced Sex Trafficking, What It Is and How You Can End It. And then in my personal life, I'm a wrestling coach, and what else? Like talk about nerd stuff all day, Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing.
Nice.
Yeah, so fantasy nerd, sci-fi, definitely.
Well, you're
And
in good
seriously
company.
stoked. I could tell already, and that's work, but my free time, I definitely Henry Cavill really made me feel comfortable coming out as a nerd.
I know what you mean.
Uh,
I know what you mean.
I could just point to him and be like, Superman does Warhammer.
That's
So,
right.
That's right. It's like, listen, if Henry Cavill, Mr. Giga Chad 10,000, yoked to the goat, in movies, sex symbol Henry Cavill can like Warhammer and D&D, so can I.
that's not a bad Chad. That's a rad Chad. That's
Right.
what he is. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, Henry Cavill, legitimately, everything I know about him, like, I generally don't like celebrities. Everything I know about that guy makes me like him.
Well, it's a funny thing with celebrity where if you're a celebrity, public figure, and you're nice to people, they are so happy about it as if it's something special because that's
Yeah.
how we act. It's like, oh wow, you're famous and you're nice to people. You're so special for that. How nice of
Right.
you to not be a monster.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the rundown on my background and stuff. We could definitely, there's plenty about the book that I want to get out there. I want to spread the word on, because the whole point of this book, when I was naming it, was, how businesses used to be named like American Steel or Indian Fruit Company. And so I wanted to write this book that would be short, which it's tough. One of the challenges with writing a shorter book, when you put yourself to that challenge, is one, you need to be a lot more concise and clear,
Yep.
and two, you can't sell it for as much. If you
Right.
do a better job of it explaining it, big book, people feel more comfortable paying more. But the whole point is I wanted people to have something really bite-sized where this is, and also apolitical. I mean, I have my own beliefs, but I really want, when we serve our country, we do it for everybody, and that's because also it's about the potential. Like when we see young people and we want to help keep them safe, part of that and why we're so forgiving with them is because of all the potential that they hold. And I think when we give in to cutting off our nose to spite our face,
Right.
we end up, it's like a sacrifice of our future potential and all the good that can still be done if we show patience and understanding and also have really strong clear sense of justice that we still enact with it. And that's a challenging line to ride, but
It
that was
really
one of the
is.
goals with this book. Yeah.
It really is. Maintaining the discipline of a society to act on behalf of its morals and ethics is a challenge that has so far eluded all of humanity since we began organizing ourselves into societies. So far, no one has found the magic elixir for maintaining societal discipline over a indefinite time span, and that's why empires inevitably fall. It's one word. That is the eternal question: is how do we keep all these people in line indefinitely?
Yeah, it's tricky. Well, and that's so part of why I pursued Homeland Security was over the course of my time serving, I became really interested with the line between um, liberty and security.
Right.
So I'm actually working on my second book now, which is going to be on law enforcement reform. And I don't even know if reform's quite the right word, but I know that we can be doing better because I did the
Yes.
job, you know?
Yes.
And, that challenge is, it's about humanizing things too. One thing I ask people is, I'm not saying you have to love evil people, but can you challenge yourself to not hate people who are doing evil things or kind of agents of evil in their own way and still act more in a morally right way without that emotional baggage of it. And so that's, in both books, a theme. And so, that's really, I forgot where I started that sentence, I'm going to be honest.
That's okay. I do the
So,
same thing sometimes.
yeah.
But
Yeah. But, go ahead.
the note you were going with there, I feel compelled to challenge that, because in my opinion, the apathy of the average person. This is something you hint on. You actually talk about fairly overtly in Forced Sex Trafficking. The apathy of the average person is one of the things that makes combating these problems so difficult. And I think that appeal to emotion is one of the primary ways to combat apathy. And so if you tell people not to hate the problem, I think in some ways that detracts from combating the apathy. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm really glad that you're going to help me clarify that with that question. So I grew up Mormon, and while I'm not a member of the Church of the Latter-day Saints anymore, there's something I really appreciate about them, and it's an expression that I learned, which was hate the sin, not the sinner.
Mm-hmm.
And that really that sticks with me. Sometimes even when I travel, I'll call up missionaries from the LDS Church, and I'll ask them to come hang out so we can talk about, just whatever, because I think there's still a lot really valid there.
Mm-hmm.
And emotion is incredibly powerful. I think also hate might be, I hope this doesn't sound pessimistic, but hate might be the most powerful fuel short term. It's rocket fuel. It'll get you into space, but it's not going to help you travel long distances.
Agreed.
So if you're fundraising for a political campaign or movement, fear is the best way to raise money. And it's sad. And it's because I tell you what, if I say you're gonna die if you don't do this, you're gonna listen. Or the people you love are gonna die if you don't do this, and you're more likely to act than if I say this is really important and we want to make the world a better place. And that positive message doesn't cause people to act in the same way. Now, part of what's also destroying our world right now, the paradox, part of what's destroying our world is all this stuff on the internet that drags us into negativity and it's pulling us apart and pulling our attention in all these different directions. And so I'm not going to pretend like I have the full answer to that. What I know is that I want to make sure that a movement for change and for saving lives and for protecting human life and dignity has longevity. And so what that means in my eyes is get the emotion in there, but get it for the long haul. And so I think that's an important part of it, because I want to help more people have a lower bar. So you could have very deep support, with 1% of the population showing up for everything, donating to everything, but can we get 5% sending an email, donating $5 a month? That's a lot of my goal here is trying not to use the same tactics that are destroying us. Because also that thing like anger, vitriol, that's the same tool that our enemies are using too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know one thing I learned in law enforcement was if you have somebody shouting at you and screaming at you, the best thing you can do is to be very calm.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they look crazy, and other people are more likely to support the rational person.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you are in the wrong, if they're the one screaming, they look loony.
Yeah.
And it's not helpful for their cause or their movement either. So I think it's very important to be committed, disciplined, focused, ready to make change, and I won't say by whatever means necessary, because like I said, protecting liberty and liberty, justice, freedom, these things all have to be in a constant shift as we correct course. But it's about, like I said, got to lower the bar and be committed and make sure that we're projecting energy that we want to see in the future.
Right. Well, I can tell you, based on what I've observed of human nature and something I've discovered that this is kind of a business axiom, but it applies to just getting human behavior and getting people to do what you want them to do. The easier you make it, the more people you can convince to do it. So as much as you automate the system, as easy as you make it for people to do the right thing, if people have to spend an hour doing to do the right thing with low effort, you'll get 10%. If they have to spend 30 minutes, you might get 12. If you can make it so they can do the right thing in less than a minute, you might get as many as 25% of people to do the right thing. The easier you make it, the more people will do it. So I don't know how well that will translate to anything you can action on, but that is a universal principle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's also this dichotomy there where we need to lower the bar for entering the support, for all this, and also we need to make sure that, like, a lot of times form emails. So let's say you join some political thing and they say, press this button, put in your name, and we'll send an email to your U.S. representative in the House. And they know what the form emails are, and they just go straight to the trash.
Yep.
If you sit down and write a letter and put a stamp on it, that will be read, maybe even by the candidate. That's one of the messages I make in the book is we get so focused on holding up people get focused on holding up signs or screaming outside of buildings, and it's like, if you wrote a letter or even just a email from the heart or made a phone call to representatives or donate, like I said, $5 recurring monthly to any of these great organizations that even they hire lobbyists. You know what? I'm glad that we have lobbyists fighting against sex trafficking, against children in slavery, that kind of thing. Those are bars we can achieve. Now, I mean, it's like, selling something. I know you can relate because you're making a product right now that you're putting out into the world. And so you ask yourself, how do I get people to buy in and engage and keep showing up? And, part of that mission is the emotional aspect, and be authentic. You know what? If you're mad, be mad. Spread that message to other people, because movements change. That happens. Most of these politicians are sociopaths who don't have morals.
Agreed.
That's the first. But here's the thing. I think that when they do evil, it's more often incidental and them waking up and deciding they want to be a villain. It's more that
I'd say that's true for a chunk of them. Yeah, a big chunk of them.
Absolutely. I'm not saying it's everybody, but if you go into it with that presupposition, you're going to make more change than if you just throw up your hands. And having spoken to U.S. senators, House representatives from all political parties, did some good work with the Libertarian Party doing fundraising, local representatives especially. A lot of these people care more about, even the ones who maybe are evil, a lot of them care more about getting reelected than anything else. Pretty much all of them, because that's the only source of their power.
Right.
That's their power. You can either be really wealthy, have a lot of people on your side, or be an elected official. And so if they feel like they're going to lose their seat, if they feel like these people in my city council district raised $5,000 for my opponent because I didn't respond to their email with the right answer about passing local laws on ending human trafficking, I mean, that is how simple it can be. You send an email, you say, I'm going to donate $100 to your opponent if you don't have a satisfactory answer. You'll get, especially on a local level, 100 people, 50 people, you'll get meetings with city council members.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
by the way, I wanted to say too, I really appreciate you reading the book, because that's how I know though about your commitment to what you're doing, is because you showed up, you read the book, you looked at it,
Oh yeah.
I appreciate it.
So two things. Let me respond to that, and then I have something. Someone in the comments said something that is a fairly poignant comment. Welcome in Math Life, by the way.
Yes.
But as an author, I don't know how much you looked into me, but I'm an author. Kate is an author, and I've interviewed authors of fiction works. That's how I actually got one of the things I got my start doing on YouTube when I went down the journey of creating content. Is I started interviewing people, was one of the big things on my channel at first. And in my mind, if you're going to be interviewing someone and they wrote a book, it's just kind of common sense to read it. You know what I mean? To be informed about the subject you're trying to do an interview on. Like, I understand if it's you know, a 10 million word tome and you have to interview them next week, you're not going to be able to read it. But, you know, that was not the case with us. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, and it's also something I'm just plain passionate about. Human trafficking is undoubtedly one of the most horrendous evils that humanity has ever cooked up. I mean, just demonic. And so I was happy to read the book and learn a little bit more. A lot of the stuff I already knew because I've looked into it previously, but some of the stuff in there, some of the stats, for example, and some of the nonprofits that exist kind of surprised me.
Yeah, well, and there's this effect of proximity as well, where, and like I said, definitely the book is meant to be, you know, introductory, basic, bite-sized, almost like how to make legislative change for dummies is almost like what I wanted to write for me too, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's this proximity effect that needs to be faced in these cases where. If you haven't been affected, if someone hits your car, it's easy to get angry and want to destroy something. You're mad, and you're not. It's easy to not look at stuff like this. It's easy, as widespread as it is. The easiest person to lie to is ourselves, and it's you don't want to think about it. It's not fun to think about. And what I kind of, you know, part of what I hope the book will help people do is almost what I want is set it and forget it almost. If we can have enough people, build enough of a movement where you write your email, set an alarm on your calendar reminder for an email once a month, and this is that time you do that, and it takes 2 minutes, and you have your $5 recurring donation each month to your charity of choice, and then the rest of the time you're doing something about it. Hell yeah, you're doing something about it. You're part of the answer. You're saving human lives. Because, gosh, I mean, if you could, it would traumatize a lot of people, but not all trauma is bad. And some people, if I could just take them and show them the realities of this. And I spoke to a gentleman who's retired CIA anti-trafficking expert, spent 30 years focusing on the cartels in South America and Latin America and what they do with human trafficking, which is now one of the most profitable forms of making money for the cartels and for organized crime worldwide.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And you said there was a question from someone in the comments?
Yeah, and something you just said is actually a fairly good tie-in / segue. From Math Life, unfortunately, some people care more about feeling like they did the right thing than the actual cause, and this emotional laziness can promote placebo buttons that don't lead anywhere.
Broke up a little bit there. I heard the placebo button part. Was there anything after that?
So he says, some people care more about feeling like they did something than actually doing something, and this can lead to emotional laziness that promotes placebo buttons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we first have to manifest in ourselves. We first have to make this change within ourselves, make our commitment, and then find some way to bring this to others, to talk about it. I mean, that's the thing too. If you start with yourself, you can call it a day. If you want to go greater than that and really bring purpose to your life, because I don't know if humans are programmed to be happy very easily. I think it's kind of supposed to be difficult because if it's too easy to be happy, why are you going to do anything? You feel good. All right, great,
Yep.
good job. I feel bad for a lot of people who are born into great wealth, actually, and why a lot of even billionaires
Mm-hmm.
say they're going to give their kids almost nothing, and it's like maybe that's for the best, uh, because you can just feel like, okay, I'm good. I got it figured out. So if you want to go above and beyond, just the great work of at least contributing to a good cause, sending an email, sending a letter,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you talk about it, post about it. I At my birthday this year, I threw myself a cool birthday party. I like to think of it as weaponized narcissism because we do want to pat ourselves on the back. We do, you know what, if give people that win, give it to them. So what we did is at my birthday party this year, we had a barbecue, good steak. I had a friend who makes these amazing fire pits that are really incredible.
Nice.
I wish I could remember the name of it. I should plug it before we finish because his stuff. He just hit 1 million views on TikTok. He's an incredible artist. But anyway, he
Nice.
he
Nice.
yeah. uh, we made a bunch of steak and we had everybody in. And when we came into the living room, I opened my gifts and then I talked to everybody about a few of these organizations. I showed them me starting a donation with one of them right there in front of them, and how it only took about a minute. And I asked everybody if I could, if they would commit on the spot, and then I wrote down their info, and I'm going to check in with them next year. And what I hope to do is I just turned 30, and at every birthday for the next 10 years, try and throw a cooler, bigger birthday, and this is just one part of it, and keep track of that information and the donations, and then when I hit my big 4-0, I can write that down and be like, look at how much we've donated over the last 10 years, and you weaponize your narcissism, weaponize feeling good for yourself, weaponize patting yourself on the back, and then you
Mm-hmm.
know you can have bad people go to jail and innocent good people saved, and it doesn't have to all be dour, you know.
Yeah. So I do have some questions written down that I want to get to because they're all pretty pertinent to things that are going on in the world right now and the subject material of your book. And you touched on one of them already with your mentioning of the cartels. Uh, and this is something we argue about with me and an audience member in particular in my stream argue about this fairly often. Um, Tell me about the border crisis and that issue's impact on human trafficking.
So when the way laws get constructed plays such a big role in all of this, and the way that our legal system and border security system is set up currently, it's not terribly difficult to get into this country. Uh, and there is a lot of money to be made if you can create a good system for doing it. We're talking billions of dollars, and human trafficking and drug smuggling absolutely go hand in hand with that.
Yeah.
A lot of people trying to get over the border, and we need to find a more effective way of making sure that people who need help and are willing to do it in a way that makes sure we can vet them. Because people talk about illegal, legal, all of that. I'll tell you on a personal level, and again, if I ever share my personal political beliefs, I really hope that listeners will still know that the books I write are about making changes that can work for everybody that are as apolitical as possible.
Mm-hmm.
My view is, I was in Kuwait a few years ago doing some work, and about 70% of the Kuwaiti population is non-citizens. They pay taxes, they are there legally, they're documented, they have all the paperwork together so that the Kuwaiti government can make sure that they're not criminals. In fact, the only way to be a Kuwaiti citizen is if your grandfather was born there.
Hmm.
And so I think that this is a bigger picture thing, but I like people being able to come to our country. I think that's great, and I think you remove a lot of there was this horrible case a few years ago where about 15 pregnant women, 20 pregnant women, they all of them had balloons filled with heroin and cocaine explode in their stomachs and kill them and their infants while they were getting smuggled across the border. They probably weren't criminals, but they were doing a criminal thing And whether they were being forced to do that, coerced to do that, which does happen. Um, it's dark stuff, and we we can streamline these systems and do it in a way that's economically advantageous. Doesn't it's better for the we can do it in a way that's better for the economy and for safety, security, and liberty. Can find some balancing here, and so the current system, there's so much bureaucracy. For a lot of these visas and stuff, you spend $10,000, and in somewhere like Kuwait, when I was talking to the Kuwaiti soldiers, they were saying they make it really easy because you're going to come there, you're going to work as a foreigner, you're not going to get any of their economic programs brought to you. Especially, it's harder to commit fraud in those programs when you are fully documented. It's actually easier to in the system when you're undocumented, and so those people, the non-citizens, that's 70% of their population, they're paying taxes on when they buy goods. They're paying taxes on their wages. If they were here in America, they would be contributing to Social Security while not being in the program, but they get to be here. It's almost like being an American citizen, in my view. And again, this is kind of like my inner libertarian shining. You get the American premium plan, and there's American light for the other folks who come here the right way. And I think that would lead to a lot less suffering and pain, death, and just, for some of these people, death is what would have been better compared to what they were facing once they got here. It's monstrous, and
Yeah.
we need more room for innovation. I think the U.S. has gotten so risk averse. We're so scared of a program not
Yeah.
working out because it's weaponized against you, and I want to see that courage, that to try something and be willing for it to maybe not work out. Because what we got now, it's tough to do worse. Is kind of how it feels, and I think that's what happens. I mean, from a business perspective, if you're afraid to innovate, if you're afraid to move on, you're immobilized with fear, then you are gonna die. You wither.
So, do you like dad jokes?
I love dad jokes.
Okay, my chat you might like this. It doesn't seem to be working giving these people visas. Has anyone thought of giving them MasterCard instead? But to get back on track,
Yeah.
so
That was good.
yeah, I got a chuckle out of it. That's what I was laughing at while you were still talking.
Or Carbonated said, no point for giving frequent flyer miles. They're bust everywhere.
Yeah, or they walk in caravans. So I think that there's reasonable discussion to be had along the lines of what you just laid out. Tell me, I'm gonna give just a few things I would do, and let me know if you agree or disagree. I would say,
Actually,
go ahead.
sorry, real quick. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Let me give you like a 30-second snippet too. I went on a bit of a tangent there, but from a human trafficking perspective too, with the immigration issue and challenge, a lot of it's going to come just from supporting the aid organizations and the lobbying organizations that make sure that we can prosecute the people who do this, because we do have agreements with a lot of these other countries where as long as we have the investigative capabilities within the Department of Justice and FBI, different non-governmental organizations, we can actually get people extradited to us or get them thrown in jail in their own country, although there are corruption issues with that. So there's work to be done beyond that. Like I laid out a giant policy there that would be real tough to make happen, but the short answer of it is just we really need to strengthen our law enforcement capabilities for making sure that we can throw the scumbags responsible for this in jail forever.
Okay, I agree with that
There you go.
100%. Would you say some kind of meaningful border barrier would be productive or useful?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, from a Homeland Security, national security perspective, I'm really interested in a lot that can be done with drones and infrared. Having humans out there is great, but as someone who's done security, human guards are. It's just tough for people to stare at a a spot in the desert for very long and be a good sensor. So there's a
Right.
lot of really incredible sensor technology that we can create. I think also though, like I'm not saying like I absolutely yes, and we really need to be working on a bigger scale level with arrangements with these governments to get them to do some of the heavy lifting there. They should really be putting a lot of resources into that.
I agree. I think that the governments to the south of us should be taking the issue more seriously, but it's very clear that they pretty much just don't care at all.
Yeah.
So a lot. This is something that I came up with kind of as a joke, but the more I think about it, the more I actually kind of love it. Let me know what you think of this. We do the Panama Canal, but we do that at our southern border.
I don't know. People have swum from the U.S. to Cuba and Cuba to the U.S. There's some great swimmers out there.
But we fill the moat with alligators and feed them a steady diet of meth.
I I'm gonna yes and that. Yes and hippos. People sleep on hippos, but hippos. I'm more scared of a
hippos
hippo
are
than an
mean.
alligator.
Oh, yeah, hippos are mean. Violent, destructive bastards.
Oh dear.
That's what like these are big. These are big problems, and so it's tough to make things more bite-sized. And like I said too, I want to be clear. Like some stuff like the border, I touch on less.
hippos. I see what he did there.
So it's I do like I'll answer any of these questions, of course, and I hope it always is clear that I do want to answer them. I just also want to make sure that people know that with stuff like the book, it's like people from every walk of life, from whether you're a police officer or whatever, far left, far right, authoritarian, non-authoritarian, whatever. This is stuff that really should make a positive difference no matter what. As far as border policy and that kind of thing, I mean, I'm also a product of my background. I'm a dude who was in the military and did border security in Iraq with a degree in Homeland Security. So that tinges how I feel, and how I treat that stuff. I understand that.
Yeah. Well, those occupations statistically lean right. And in case it isn't completely obvious, I'm a constitutional conservative. I'm about as right as it gets. So I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've established some kind of meaningful border barrier is good. Physical, good. Technological.
Want Americans building it, though.
What was that?
Americans need to be building it, though. That's another one. Sorry to interrupt, but
That's I could agree with that. So physical good, technological probably better, and I think there's a reasonable discussion to be had there. Improvement of law enforcement at the border. What about? Do you think that it would be and this is a dangerous statement to make, but I'm gonna make it. Do you think that some kind of a physical deterrent in terms of force would be effective? Like, say our policy was, if you cross our border illegally, we shoot on sight. Would that be effective?
I have an issue with that from a perspective that being, we learned this in security in the Middle East, that if you do assume some risk and in law enforcement, you assume some risk when you leave some room in there to not, assert the law or security as aggressively as you can. But I mean, Al Qaeda, ISIS, they made a habit also of giving like kids grenades and women, pregnant women grenades and bombs to.
So you're concerned about the escalation?
Yeah, they know how to tug at our heartstrings. They know how to make a bad press story. And the answer to that isn't to give them more ammunition and to make it less popular. The answer is, like I said, I think it's really important that we aggressively sort out people who, I mean, honestly, and this is, I don't know, there's going to be people who are going to call this sexist or something. I don't care. I would be more comfortable saying make it much easier for women and children who are like under 13 to come into the country, because they're really not the ones who are committing most of this crime
I
without
agree.
being coerced and forced into it. We
Yeah,
got to find a way to sort and sift more effectively. And
I agree.
so,
Yeah, that's not a matter of sexism one way or the other. That's just a statistical fact. Men are overly represented in violent crime by a factor of 7 out of 10. Men are overrepresented in drug-related crime. I think 6 out of 10 compared to women. Um, and you could just go down the list almost across the board. Whatever type of crime you mention, men are overrepresented compared to women, and it's usually men in the 15 to 40 range that are doing that crime. So I think that statement is completely reasonable.
yeah, and it's tough too, because there's so much of this corruption. I just was reading about how in this is the deadliest year that we know of for journalists in Mexico. So we have this narco state right below the border, and there's so much money to be made, and these people are so feckless and so craven that they will, they'll abduct a child and then put a bunch of drug balloons in their stomach and send them over the border. And I don't
Right.
want to create. As someone who's done security, I'm not going to put a border patrol officer in a position where they might. Or I'm going to do everything I can to limit the chance they have to shoot a child who's been forced to run across that border.
That makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I understand that. Like I said at the start of that question, put the morals aside, but I understand it's very hard to do that with a type of question like that. So we can, I'll consider that question adequately answered. Unless you have something else pertinent, I do want to move on to some of the other questions I have for you.
Please do. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So another thing that's kind of gripping the political conversation right now, and this is an area of personal fascination and personal interest because as someone who's an author of fiction works, things that are narratively complex and there's more than meets the eye to them, they inherently fascinate me and hold my interest. And so, and you mentioned him in your book, Epstein, and his client list, and the issue of global elites preying on children and seeming to be immune to legal repercussions or even detection by the public of what they're doing. Talk to me about that.
This corruption, the amount of influence. I mean, members of the royal family, politicians in the United States. Like I said, I've laid out my background here, and without a doubt, there are. I mean, I know it's kind of a trite term at this point, but global pedophilic elites. These people who we can know that they were involved with these things, and they face no consequences. Even the circumstances around Epstein's death are so disgusting that I mean, they were probably he was. I believe Jeffrey Epstein was likely, and I didn't include this in the book, but Jeffrey Epstein was likely at different points in his adult life an asset of various foreign intelligence services and maybe even our own intelligence services, because you can't train people to have the kind of power that he did, where he spent decades blackmailing people. And he would, like, one of the things he did was he would tell people to go get a massage, and then it would be like, a 16-year-old or something, and he would say like, oh, you just, like, bad situation, they bad stuff, all this horrible stuff. The point is, it turns my stomach that we can know that these people just get to keep living their ultra wealthy lives without consequences.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big problem to try and fix. It really is.
Yeah.
I think most one of the things I mentioned in the book is just about adopting the anti-racketeering legal structure that we have towards human trafficking, so that it's easier to prosecute up the chain of these organizations,
Yes,
but it goes so deep
it
in the
does.
power structures. And it crosses racial boundaries. It crosses, gender boundaries. It's about powerful people doing bad things and being able to get away with it. And I mean, look, who among us wouldn't just put a bullet in the head of one of these people to stop them from raping someone else if that was the choice in front of you, like the trolley problem, like
Yeah.
stop this person from being alive and children don't get raped, and you wonder why and it's like it's understandable why people would get upset. I mean, Epstein himself was caught. He was literally abducting and coercing middle school and high school girls blocks away from him in New York City, and then ended up flying them around the world. And so and what's been done about it? I don't want to sound pessimistic. I just
No.
try to control what I can.
Yeah, I understand that, and for me, we can talk about the charities and looking and training people to be aware of the signs and all that kind of stuff, and we can get the average person pretty good at keeping their kids and the kids in their neighborhood safe and being on the lookout of preventing the local neighborhood pedo from victimizing a kid. We can get pretty good at that. In fact, as a society, we're not too far from that. Where we as a society are having a bigger problem right now is this top-down, anti-child, pro-pedophile, pro-groomer agenda and mindset of the global and social elite. And I think that one of the main ways to go after that and one of the main ways to actually see change in that area is to dig out political corruption. And that has to start by actually prosecuting criminal politicians who are corrupt behind closed doors, who take bribes, who break U.S. law, who are guilty of treason. For example, Katie Hobbs, governor-elect in Arizona, we now know for a fact she violated her oath to the Constitution. It's not even up for debate. She's guilty of treason for breaking the First Amendment against multiple constituents and her political opponent. Why isn't she in handcuffs? So in my opinion, and I want you to tell me if you think this is a nail on the head or if you think there's a better place to start, my thoughts on ending the global pedophile problem is actually holding our elected officials accountable and throwing them in prison when they either don't do their job that they promised they would or when they are flat out engaging in illegal activity.
I think we need a lot of people that are elected officials in this country in jail for the rest of their lives. In South Korea, their last president went to jail for corruption. And that's not a terribly uncommon thing there. But, wow, imagine that, laws being upheld.
Right.
A president, the whole point of
Right.
why George Washington called it, he said, call me Mr. President. He could have been a king. He could have been anything. President was almost a comical term for him to choose for the title of that office, because a president, the person who presides over a group, like you have a meeting for the Rotary Club, and he's like, "Oh, he's the president." Yeah, that's what it was. There was that humility to it because you were supposed to be one of us. You were supposed to be one of we the people, and
Right.
it's clear that there's this stratified thing where the laws don't apply to a huge number. I mean, there's that Chappelle Show sketch a few, when they're on Chappelle Show where they showed how different people, like the cops, will bust into some people's homes, and other people they'll like send them an email, and that's the thing. I want these people getting their doors knocked down.
Right.
I want them getting guns shoved in their face, like what happened to most of us. In fact, the next book is on law enforcement, but I'm working on a series, and one of them is going to be just about how our gun rights have also been eroded. Just on a side note, and how
Amen.
people think they have far more, but even in conservative areas, there's these registries, and they know that if they're the fact that there can be a registry, and then if the cops get called because someone's worried about you or whatever, red flag law, they can kick down your door and point a gun in your face,
Right.
because
that's
they have
not
you on a
escalatory
list.
or anything.
Right.
Well, it's, you know, like I said, I think there's, you know, with the not to go off topic too much, but with the next book being on law enforcement, as a former law enforcement official, people need to step back a little bit and remember that, like I loved being a cop. I helped people on good days. I felt like a superhero. Like it was so rewarding, and but also we need to also remember these are government employees with badges and guns meant to enforce even unjust laws.
Right.
Whatever, if the government writes a law right now saying round up all the Jews and throw them in a camp, I'm positive that many law enforcement officials in this country and professionals would leave the job or would refuse to enforce that. It's still a job, and you know, and unjust laws happen, and people tell themselves, "Oh, I have a pension. I don't want to lose that." We have to be careful.
Well, so you're right. I do think a lot of people would walk away, but the sad reality is a lot of people would just do as they were told. We know from the growing body of psychological analysis and study that a certain percentage of people are what you've probably heard the term NPCs. They do as they're told. They have no critical thinking. They have no self-agency. They get along to move along, and they do as they're told. And I think that at least 60 or 70% of the people in law enforcement fall under that designation. And I think that's true based upon looking at things like the fact that during the 2020 riots, law enforcement basically did nothing because the politicians told them not to. Right now, we're having this issue with Drag Queen Story Hour, and that's obviously textbook grooming, and it's textbook violation of public indecency laws and violation of multiple laws that say you can't expose kids to sexual material, and cops aren't doing anything about that. So, while I am sure that there is a line that would make a lot of cops walk away, I think that at this point, that line has been demonstrated to be so far away that we cannot rely on law enforcement to solve this problem in any meaningful way as it exists right now, which I'm glad that you're going to be writing a book on reform or improvements, because that's desperately something we need.
We need security. We need to like have peace, and the biggest thing is though you can't, you know, it's that balance, because you don't want peace without freedom, because what is that worth? And same for freedom without peace, and you're, you know, Wild West. And there's no room for justice in that space either. I mean, cops. Like I said, I did the job, you know, and I miss it a lot sometimes. And I also know that they're people, not better or worse. They're just another subsect, another job. Pretty good healthcare plans, like compared to a lot of other jobs, but they're people, you know, they're dudes and chicks, and they were just out there, you know, and some of them really want to make the world a better place. A lot of them even. I also know that there are people. A lot of people do some really bad stuff by telling themselves, you know, my job's to keep everybody safe, and so if that means I have to have, you know, destroy their constitutional rights to keep them safe, that's okay. And they
Right.
Their morals are like, they are morally correct in that, but they lose sight of so many other things. But that's like I said, you know, it's like, I'm not going to say defund accountants or all accountants are bastards. I'm going to say that's another job. You know, like although something I would like to see, while you were talking before, about a few different things that I think, and like, I'm very much like, I'm a legislative nerd and a social change nerd, and something that really interests me would be, you know, like especially in California, but a lot of other places, they have these laws that, I mean, you'll go to jail much longer for, I don't know, cheating on your taxes or getting in a bar fight than you will for sexually assaulting a child, or
Right.
raping a child. You know
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, thanks, Representative Wiener.
Let's talk more about this offline. Fans are welcome. We should start like a PAC that donates to candidates that make a commitment for life sentences for people who do that kind of stuff. That's you know, that needs to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
I've been advocating for a while that In cases where there's overwhelming evidence, such as video evidence of the perpetrator doing what they did, or an adult male semen found in a child, in cases like that where there's overwhelming evidence that is absolutely beyond any possible circumstantial proof, that person should get the death penalty. And that should be a federal law. If you rape a kid, that's a sickness that can't be fixed. And we know that from looking at the recidivism rates of pedophiles. It's through the roof. It's higher than gang violence.
Even if you could fix it, there, the legal... I actually had this conversation recently with some younger people, some college students who we were talking about criminal justice. A lot of criminal justice students have been looking at my book, which I'm happy about. And this question we all should ask ourselves: is jail there to protect the rest of us from these people, to make sure that they face consequences for what they did, or to reform them? And this is part of the legal things that these a lot of these nonprofits that do the lobbying to fight sex trafficking, that they get to get into the weeds on with politicians when they meet with them, is the different levels based on how much evidence you have, kind of like with murder, how there's first degree, second degree, third degree, all that. And so depending on the preponderance of evidence, that decides. And if people are people there to be punished? Are people there to keep us safe? And when it comes to something like those extreme crimes that we have plenty of evidence that they're doing it, and I mean, some of these cases, it's horrifying. You find people who have five different cases that they've been convicted of, and maybe they were all low evidence, but it's 5 times now. Right. And so with those cases, protect people from them, and that means unalive them. Yes. That's what that means.
Yeah. I mean, especially if they've been convicted multiple times. And, this is a problem that I used to live near Memphis, and that was another issue that we had was, well, it's still an issue now. You have people that are convicted of doing things like that multiple times, and they're constantly released early. Yeah. Which, that's just unconscionable.
A lot of times there's some of the best behaved inmates you have because they want to get back out there on the streets before anybody else does, that they're more than anybody else. And that's, what you're talking about right now, that's one of the things that send one email. But if you took an afternoon, invite some friends over, have some beers and say, we're going to all email every one of our city council members. And we're going to say, in fact, I would even come back on sometime and maybe we'll write letters on air. And the people listening can write and even share what they're writing. And if you, in one town, you get 5 or 10 people to write emails or letters or do phone calls to every city council member you have and say, we want to pass a law here, and this goes for state representatives too. We want to pass a law here that's going to make sure that if people have been a repeat offender for any of the following sexual crimes, and so it can include low ones, that they have these harsher sentences, to include even the death penalty. You decide that together. That's the thing that scares politicians the most. They care more, even the evil ones care more about getting reelected and getting campaign donations to get reelected than they care about anything else, because they lose all their power if they lose their election.
Right.
You don't get an email back, you don't get a phone call back, we're donating to your opponent. We're going to go to everyone. We'll run someone against you if we have to, and I promise you we're going to raise as much money as we can, and we will keep challenging you every single election. And that goes for everyone on the city council, and that goes for the mayor. You're going to be a thorn in your ass like nobody else, because we want this change.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I find it interesting and encouraging that you're emphasizing doing it at that local level. There's an axiom that goes around that all politics are local politics. And that really is true, because the smaller scale you try to work at, the less momentum you need to actually affect change. At a federal level, you and 10 friends aren't going to do shit. At a local level, like a city council election, you and 10 friends, each donating $100 or each writing an email, like you said, could be legitimately impactful. So I agree that's where the change needs to start.
Yeah, if you all make a commitment for every one of the candidates that signs this pledge, we'll each like try to do a little fundraiser, or each donate at least 100 for the primary and 100 for the general, and we'll all commit to spending 10 hours knocking on doors for you. Local officials, you tell me I support a policy aggressively. I'm running for city council and I just agree to this and I'm ready to kick ass for it, and you'll knock on some you and your 5-10 friends are going to knock on some doors for me. We're going to donate a little bit of money. That is huge. That's amazing. Especially if you can say my opponent won't support this or hasn't returned our calls. That's going to change some votes.
Yeah.
That feels good, but it takes patience, and it takes showing up, and it takes not hiding your head in the sand. It takes courage. Sometimes being patient is courage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There's that's a good segue to bring up something that I think doesn't get talked enough about in this country. And it's something that's called the do something disease. So a lot of the really bad laws we have on the books come from patients, come from a complete lack of patience on the part of politicians and people in government positions of power. Bad thing happens, or natural disaster happens, or whatever, and there's public outrage in the moment, and so they write up a hasty law and cram it through, and it actually wasn't that good of an idea, but now it's on the books forever. Whereas if they were patient, gathered data, actually talked to experts, and made a coherent plan before they acted on it, maybe that law wouldn't have been so garbage. And sometimes, here's the hard reality that the adults who vote in this country need to swallow. Sometimes bad things happen, and the best thing to do is say, man, that really fucking sucked, and do nothing at all after.
Yeah. That proximity bias. I mean, that's part of like when you were talking about harsher border security. NPCs are not. They can win if enough people get mad enough and see pictures of like dead kids and dead ladies, and so whether or not we like it, that's part of the game that we're all playing, is the PR game.
Yeah.
And so the proximity bias is part of that, and bringing this conversation to people, and people care, but it's like, gosh, if everybody who was willing to send a tweet about this or that kind of thing was just willing to write an email. But that's where, like I said, get people together, and yeah, there's plenty of those bad laws on the books, and that patience. It like I said too, those organizations, you can look them up too. There's great organizations, but they're mentioned in my book as well. They can also do the work of helping to write these laws. But I say, tell your local officials, man, if somebody has 5 of these convictions, or they're doing this or they're doing that, send them to jail for life, and we want a commitment on that from you. Yeah. But I appreciate the fire. You even got me a little fired up.
I'm a very passionate person. It's a big part of the reason I do this stream and I'm active in the political world at all is because I didn't want to be. I started my online presence in terms of making content focused on stuff about my book. I wanted my life to be about writing my stories and creating art and all that stuff. And then, shortly after I did, I noticed that the trajectory of the political climate, it went from getting bad at a pretty quick rate to getting bad at light speed, and I couldn't not say anything,
Yeah, well, part of my big mission is about a lot of the stuff we've talked about here. Most people, regardless of political leaning, wouldn't be on board for. You could, there's people from all different sorts of the political spectrum. If you say, will you sign this petition or join this email list where our whole mission is getting donations to city and state elected officials or people running for office who sign a commitment to support this law that would make it so that people who are groomers or have multiple child sexual assault or rape convictions, they will, and you could even do statewide ballot initiatives. People would sign up for that, but we get caught in details, and I understand because it's intense, but a lot of it is propagated by the mainstream media to distract us from being able to unite behind the things that we could unite by.
I agree.
And that's divide and conquer, because that's the thing is, if you're one of these global pedophilic elites, and you want us standing outside of Planned Parenthoods or this or that, which if people do that, do it, that kind of thing. I'm just saying, like, we can unite on some stuff, and that's part of my thing with like hating people is there's so much that we overlap on, and billions upon billions of dollars are spent trying to get us to despise people who we could sit at the table with on some stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's something I've experienced right here on Twitch, trying to make community connections. And what's funny is there's other streamers on this platform. I'm not going to name names, but there's a streamer in particular that I should be able to have a reasonable conversation with him. But due to personality conflicts and the fact that they just buy whatever is the narrative that's true, and the fact that he thinks that it's okay to mutilate kids with surgery and chemicals, at that point I can't have a reasonable conversation with you. It's like you think that X is true because some people in a think tank and a bunch of news articles said it is, or you think that this is debunked because a bunch of journalists who are all your political enemy all said that it's debunked. It's like, how can I have a conversation with an NPC? You know what I mean? It's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, well, and with some of that stuff in particular, I just wonder, like, is that the hill you want to die on? Is like, I knew this woman, and she decided she wanted to be a man when she was 19, and she got her breasts cut off and went on hormone therapy, and then changed her mind a few years later, and is now going to go get fake breasts, and it probably won't ever be able to have kids, and it's like this is a that's the hill people choose to die on, and to me that just seems like, and that's another thing as well, is I understand how we can want to fight a lot of these fights, and I'm glad that there are people out there fighting it. My thing, I want to keep, I have a goal set for myself. I'm sure you can appreciate it as a fellow author and creator, is I want to publish one book a year over the next decade. And the next one will be ready, I think the law enforcement one by April. Yeah, and I want each of these books to be, well, and thankfully, since they're nonfiction, it's like a lot more research based. I don't have to worry about carrying and compelling narratives in the same way. And so,
yeah,
I want each of these books to be something where it's like everybody can do something good with it and kind of feel like it speaks to them, and I know that this is doable if you focus on the right niche things,
right?
You get into good details, and that's what, like, I remember hearing. It's so funny to me how so many Democrats focus on the gun debate, and I'm like, God, that is such a losing issue. But it's like, why are we even talking about guns while we have so many other way bigger problems? Like you said, it's the recency thing, though. It's because you see on the news about some unfortunate circumstances, and people want to pound the gavel about that, and it's like, we got way bigger fish to fry as a society, and a lot of those things are upstream causes anyway. Like that, if we fixed some of these other problems, we probably wouldn't have to deal with that,
Now I agree with that. So it's one quick side note, and then I'll get back on track. But just really quick, you're welcome, by the way, to come on to talk about all your books when you drop them or as they come up. I've liked our interaction so far, and I think this is a compelling conversation. And I'm happy to have you back on anytime you want to come on to plug your stuff. every time you're about to drop a book, because I think that would be good for both of us. To get back on track, though. So, I respectfully disagree. I don't think that the gun thing is a minor thing, because it's a fundamental right, the ability to have modern weaponry so that you can defend yourself in the world as it exists. That is a fundamental human right. That is not a small issue. Now, I do agree with you on the second part of your statement, though, where you say the real problem is upstream from that. And I agree. That goes right back to the political corruption thing. The real problem isn't that our gun rights are being taken away. The real problem is that we have people in power who want to take our gun rights away. That's the real problem. And the reason they want to take our gun rights away is because they want to do things to us that we know we would shoot them for.
Yeah. Well, and I want to clarify, actually. So I hand waved a little bit on guns, but I fully believe, these are my personal views, and when I get to the book on it, I really want to leave more room for people to kind of use research-backed decisions with this kind of stuff. But like I said, registries, red flag laws, that kind of stuff. That's the thing. I don't think more gun control should be getting enacted at all. And there's a lot of stuff I'd peel back. I was just in Pennsylvania and got to go to the range, and I'm holding one of the extended magazines, and I'm like, it's so dumb if you know anything about guns to ban those. But it gets into the minutia. Yeah. My point is, and why I said that is that Democrats should stop trying to do that. It loses them votes. And they're doing it for ulterior motives. But my point is just, it's poor strategy because it's not what the American public wants. And that's a lot of times how I think too. Is like, you got to put it in their terms. You're trying to win elections, and then also, like I said, that's kind of my thing. Is why are you trying to tell me we need more gun control laws when we have all these other things we need to fix? That's where you're putting your attention. When when you're our elected representative, you're the person we chose to represent us, whether it's in the state house or the city hall or in the in Congress, U.S. Congress. We're sending you there, and that's what you're focused on. Mm-hmm. And I don't, like I said, I'm just talking about gun control in that case, not not increasing people's liberties and freedoms. Yeah, that's my thing. Is I think there needs to be more. I'm like I said, I lean libertarian. I'm pro freedom as much as possible, and the only real exceptions for that are when there's a threat to public safety or something like that. But our right to protect ourselves is something I absolutely agree with. I mean, as I said, as I carry, in the military and that kind of stuff, we all owned guns, and bases are some of the safest places to be.
Yes, yeah, I had the pleasure of working on a military base recently as a day job. And yeah, I mean, the atmosphere on base, it legitimately felt like I was in like the 1950s or something, because people were just friendly with each other. They would talk to the person next to them. There wasn't this constant hold people at arm's length mentality, because there's an atmosphere of safety, and that comes from having strong men around who will beat the crap out of someone who tries to do a bad shooting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I too always err on the side of freedom. I'm small government. The government, smaller and weaker, the better. And I think you would probably agree that a good rule of thumb is one person's rights end where the next person's begins, and vice versa. And my right to defend myself, you don't have a right to live in the exact perfect world you want to live in. No human has that right. I do, however, have a right to defend myself. So there is the left-wing argument for more gun control. It's based in pure emotion. There's no logic to it whatsoever.
Yeah, well, and that's, like I said, I really appreciate you helping me clarify. This isn't stuff I talk about publicly as much, so now I'm more prepared if it comes up in the future. Is that my point is there's people trying to fight to take away our rights, instead of focusing on what's going to improve our lives substantively. And so thank you for helping me clarify that.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
I
that's
love talking about this stuff.
oh, I can tell and I appreciate it. That's if I end up doing the gun book, which it's on my list, but we'll see. You know, it's 10 books and that kind of thing. 10 years is the goal, but um, I'm gonna write that book with the aspiration of all walks of life. Someone who's hardcore anti-gun, I'd want to be able to hand that book to them and have it have an effect on their views. Because that's the thing is, you can make more money just speaking to your side, and there is a space for that. Like if you're fundraising, especially. But I want to help bring people towards better solutions. That's my role. We all have these parts to play in making our better future. And some of it is, it's I want to bring data to the table. I want to bring the stuff that really can shift people. And if they're going to be ideologically driven, fine. But if you change 5% of minds that disagree with you over the over any concentrated area or the whole population, that's going to swing a lot of elections. That's going to change a lot of laws and policies if people are informed and care and know what they're actually voting for.
Quick circle back because my chat has a question for you. My chat wants to know what your everyday carried firearm is.
Walther PPQ 9mm.
That's Crowder's gun.
Yeah.
It's been good to me.
You know, I've been thinking about checking out Walther. I currently don't own one. My dad, for some reason, just didn't have any in his collection, which I inherited. I've been thinking about getting a Walther because I hear nothing but good things about him.
Yeah, that's what the German police force carries, and it's pretty precise. I've been nothing but satisfied. Although I think I'm probably gonna get a Glock next. I just feel like I should have that too.
Yeah, I mean it's good to have in the collection.
Yeah, my dad. I think my dad has
Glock?
2 separate Glocks. Or does I have a Glock? Or am I thinking? It doesn't matter. Getting off. I don't have a mind for guns my dad had.
There's this gun range. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying you got
Okay.
chat. You got chat all excited.
Yeah.
There's actually, this is a total side note, but there's this gun range near me, indoor gun range, that does a date night special where you can like use as many different guns as you want, and you just pay one rental fee and you pay for your ammo, and that's people are looking for a nice first date. Find a range that has a date night special because that good night.
Nice.
That is a good idea. I do need to get you pwned up on shooting.
We do.
So, carbonated, so all hell pit. So, to circle back, one of the people who I frequently have debates on the immigration issue with just popped into chat, and I do want to get back. Well, I don't want to go back to the immigration thing because we really kind of beat that to death, basically. But I do want to go more into depth on the alphabet mafia side of this because I think that's a growing aspect of the issue of trafficking and grooming of children and the pipeline thereof. So, Drag Queen Story Hour and TikTok and the glorification of the LGBTQ by Hollywood, all of this, I think, has created a pipeline where normal children are indoctrinated into a lifestyle of hypersexuality very early, which obviously makes them much more accessible to pedophiles. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I will say, to me, it seems very odd when I meet a lot of, and again, I'm roaming into personal opinion again, so I'll open with that. But I see a lot of behaviors that I don't think are appropriate. I see a lot of stuff that just doesn't need to be happening, and we need to make that not happen when it comes to the drag queen story hours, and yeah, it just doesn't belong around children. Being able to do that is one thing to just be upset. Being able to make actionable change against that, I think that's also a lot of it's for parents to take care of and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? I don't feel as
Mm-hmm.
comfortable weighing in on some of those specifics because I'm not a parent. Um, I can know how I feel, my gut instincts when I meet a lot of these college students and stuff when I go to talk about criminal justice or homeland security things. It, it's a lot. I'm just gonna be honest. A lot of it seems really weird to me, and I'm just like, why do you need to be in all these little categories and that kind of thing?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I
Um,
agree.
Talking about stuff so early. Also, I think it does them disservices in so many ways, even just beyond the grooming aspect of it. I think that they're kind of losing a lot of the things that make childhood so special.
The
Um,
innocence of
isn't it's
childhood is
not knowing
destroyed
everything.
early. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's so much magic in um, things being more, more of a mystery until you're ready, and that's
Right.
so. But that's really all I can say on that. I'm not, it's really, I don't have any degrees in childhood development, or this isn't a subject that I've researched a ton or anything like that.
Yeah, I can understand and appreciate that. Uh, I guess the main thing I'm trying to zone in on is uh, what you think the role is, and is it a significant one as it relates to Ramjan? Welcome in. I'm Zach. This is our guest Chris. This is Caitlin, my fiance.
Hello.
Welcome to the chat. Hope you're having a good night. uh, where I was going with that, basically. So in your book, you mentioned that some youth are taken in by there's that one story in there about a teenage boy who's gay, and he gets dragged into a living situation where he was being used as a sex slave essentially by the owner of the house and the owner of the house's male adult friends. And I think that stuff like that is it's easier to find more kids to put in situations like that when you blast them with pro LGBTQ propaganda from an early age forward.
Yeah, well, and that's youth who identify as LGBTQ. They are far, 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 far more likely to be victims. And so I think that makes it evident that whether it's indoctrination or just over inappropriate exposure, is it's inappropriate and it increases their risk. That's what the data shows. That's what the research shows.
Yeah, and
So,
that's what I was asking for. I just wanted to know if you, because that's my understanding of the data too, basically. And so I just wanted to know if you agreed with that or if you had an expert opinion of dissent from that, but you agree. So I'm happy with that. Uh, my chat has a question for you. Are you anti-amnesty? What is so? This is again. He's the kid that is obsessed with immigration. What are you? Are you anti-amnesty or pro-amnesty? Um, and what is your overall take on legal immigration?
well, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I think a policy that would be much more effective. We need stronger border security, but also uh, more done to put pressure on Mexico and Latin American, South American countries to actually not, maybe even penalties to do that. It's a big policy change. Children under 13 and women need a much lighter policy. Let them come in, just make sure they're not criminals, and then they can come here and have jobs where we know where they are, and we know that they're paying taxes and they're not receiving benefits that they haven't, appropriately earned or are entitled to, like citizens. I also mentioned, I think part of the border security issue that isn't being talked about is a tiered system for citizenship that allows more non-citizenship residency that contributes positively to our society.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping people safe is the top priority, and also not leaving room to create really unfortunate circumstances like we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we have women and children being weaponized and coerced
Right.
into horrific situations. That's another part of the equation that really just isn't talked about with strong border security, is that we have to assume slightly more risk so that we're not doing as much damage. You know, one of the founding principles of this country is in of modern the modern justice system is better 10 guilty men walk free than one innocent man if falsely imprisoned. And that's a tough reality to sit with, and it can be debated. But the point is, I think we need to do everything we can to keep the people in this country safe and not to accidentally harm innocent people elsewhere. Because if you're harming innocent people um, with without enough precautions, then how different are you really from your enemy? That was something we were taught overseas.
So
I wish there was a simpler answer.
sometimes a complex answer really is the best one, and that's something many people need to accept, honestly. To dial in on that a little bit, so the economic side of immigration, both legal and illegal, is obviously a factor that has to be brought up at some point. You write in your book about the effects of trafficking people for labor and the practices there that are extremely
Sorry,
and
I had to walk away 1 sec.
okay.
Apologies. Sorry about that. All right, I'm
That's
back.
all right.
I needed another drink.
That's
Kombucha.
all right.
Sorry.
That's all right. I was like, did something happen? Okay. But you talk about how forced labor or labor trafficking, where people are paid just an inhumanly low wage, it's both often they're brought here illegally, and they are in a state of being indentured. So, do you think the cure for that is simply what you said earlier about empowering law enforcement to prevent that, or do you think that the labor side of trafficking has some unique aspects to it that could have unique solutions?
Well, there's a lot of overlap, and I'll say too. I mentioned before it's the difference between taking down your street level drug dealers who are just always going to be replaced, or taking down the kingpins. Part of how this country's done so much to break down organized crime in this country, civilian organized crime, was with anti-racketeering legislation that increased the effectiveness of prosecution rates and investigations into most criminal enterprises. But we don't really have a version of that for sex and labor trafficking. Now, a lot of the criminal activity, the grift, just transferred to politicians. Now they get to run the show. They muscled out the competition. And so, when we talk about border security or immigration services, we need to realize that we can't just go after the equivalent of the low-level dealer on the street. We have to go up the chain. And that brings us back to the politician thing, where I think a lot of these, you get the right hands greased in the right political office, and you have your day laborers, or you have your, victims who are working in massage parlors, or that kind of thing. So getting those laws passed, there's resistance to it, because there's people who are very powerful right now who are going to go down. I think there's a lot of overlap in how we need to handle that, and it comes with being able to prosecute up the chain.
Yeah, I agree with that. A follow-up question, semi-related, from chat: would legalizing drugs kill the drug cartels or not?
It's an interesting question. I actually asked that same question along with legalizing prostitution to one of the main people I really enjoyed interviewing for the book, who was the retired CIA trafficking expert. He was a big part of the legal side of both drugs and because there's so much overlap, and trafficking. And it's tough to say, because there's a lot of other programs that can go along with it and cultural differences. But yeah, I can tell you every weed dealer I ever knew is pissed that weed's legal in Washington State. And then the research has been done as far as how that affects DUIs or that kind of thing, but some of this approach. I think part of the magic that is America is that if you don't run everything top down, like federal government controlling everything, or just like one person controlling everything, part of the magic of this country is we have uh, hundreds, not just 50, but hundreds of experiments being run all over the country with different policies.
Right.
And then we get to look and say, wow, they're really screwing that up over in California or over in Texas. And so we're going to try doing it different here. And I think so often we want to tell ourselves that we have the answer, but I really look forward to seeing over the next few years how some of the different policy, sex, and labor related, drug, sex, and labor related policies affect how many people are actually hurt and the overall health and welfare of that society or of that community.
Well, in my opinion, with the drug one, we have a really good test tube that's pretty much showing its end result, and I think that's Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did we lose you, Chris? Hang on, is he still? He's still in the Discord call.
Yep, he's just frozen. We've always said we're constitutional conservative, Panda.
I've literally never said I'm a libertarian. I might have said something along the lines of I'm, libertarian leaning conservative on certain things. I lean libertarian on certain issues.
Well, actually, what you said specifically...
Okay. Did your laptop die on you?
It did. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I thought that might be what happened.
But actually, what you said specifically was that you, when you were a bit younger, were more social libertarian.
Yes.
Now that as you've gotten older, you're a little bit less.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, we had a question from chat while you were gone.
I wanted to ask, so you were mentioning, and I know there are some different countries that are experimenting with different policies as far as, and different places in this country that are experimenting with different policies. It's tough for me too, because like I said, that libertarian side of me, I really respect people's right to self-determine, even secession. Like I believe any union entered into voluntarily, you should be allowed to leave voluntarily. And so if a state wanted to secede, I think that should be their right. So it's tough because I feel like, a lot of places probably, if places want to screw up how they're running things, it's tough. Like if you have people in your life, you want to tell them to stop doing things that are hurting themselves. Whether it's a state or a person, how much can you force someone to be moral if they're really committed, or a place if they're really committed to not being so?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. And that's another one of those eternal questions, like I mentioned earlier, with the eternal struggle of how do we get society to self-govern over a long period of time. That's one of the smaller questions that directly attaches to the bigger question. How do we compel people to give a damn about themselves? And that's... Yeah.
A lot of philosophers have thought about that. I was just listening to some stuff about Jean-Paul Sartre and his whole thing about he said the number one question philosophy should concern itself is why we shouldn't kill ourselves. And that's what gets, I don't know, it's funny because I see a lot of really miserable people. I mean, that's what they say. There's the loneliness epidemic, and people are less happy than ever. And it's like, well, we're getting away from a lot of things that you're not going to be able to come up with a with a logical argument for why you should have a child. Because you know what? It's a dumb thing to do in a lot of ways. If you have a kid, you're going to spend $1 million raising it, and they might still turn out to be horrible. But in our heart, there's the thing, there isn't a logic to it. In our heart, most of us see kids and are like, oh my God, they're so adorable. I want one that looks like me.
Yeah.
and so,
Well, hey, I mean, the great thing about kids is they're like pancakes. If you screw up on the first one, you can always make more.
That's a good one. I like that. A+ on that.
Thanks.
But it's just it's a bigger philosophical question. But I think it's like, You know, everybody's so focused on like, they gotta label this thing or they gotta tear down that structure, and it's like, people seemed like
Yeah.
seems like people used to be happier.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should do some stuff that seemed like it was working, even if we can't come up with some, magical postmodernist mathematical equation
Mm-hmm.
that fits into the, that fits into the math on that. It's like, it's like marriage, another thing. It's like, if this doesn't work out, you might be paying a bunch of money for the rest of your life. I don't, but you know what? When you love somebody and you commit to them, that commitment gives your life meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that
As you two know. Mm.
commitments,
Yeah.
making a commitment and sticking to it is fulfilling in multiple ways. And this ties into what you said earlier about there's good trauma. Not all hardship is bad for you. In fact, a lot of hardship is actually very good for you. And one of the things people need to understand is in this modern era where people avoid anything hard like it's the Black Plague, that's the worst possible thing you could be doing for your long term mental health and fulfillment.
Yeah.
Things that are hard are always more fulfilling. And maintaining a committed relationship and actually working to make that relationship work, it's very hard. Um, it's fulfilling because humans are social animals, and nothing makes us feel good like having one person that's our ultimate co-conspirator. Humans love that shit. Um, and then there's other stuff too, like the no-fault divorce thing. No-fault divorce has been a disaster for this country, and no-fault divorce, of course, came as a result of third-wave feminism, which has also, in my opinion, been a disaster. And then we have to have a conversation about traditional virtues and values around the home and family. It's a
Yeah.
big topic. It's a really big
And
topic.
employment's a big one too. And like I
Yeah.
said, that's maybe that'll be one of the books. And that's I've started. Part of how I'm doing this too is the first book is the thing I know the most about,
Oh yeah.
and
That's a good place to start for sure.
yeah, and then second one, I know a lot about it, and then uh, see where my comfort zone is for pushing out into different fields and telling people, here's what seems to be like the best answers I can find and the best because there's compelling reasons and
Mm-hmm.
the more we can find the PCs. Sorry, I almost said non NPCs. The PCs, the player characters, the ones who
Right.
have an internal dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, find them, bring them aboard. I human capacity for change and for creation
Mm-hmm.
is it's our only hope. We're fucked if we don't capitalize on that.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that very simple statement. Uh, one of the things that the anti-abortion crowd, the pro-life crowd, often uses as a talking point is, "What if you're aborting the next Einstein?" And it's kind of one of those things that sounds silly a little bit at surface value, but I mean seriously, what if you're aborting the next Einstein? You know, there is such potential in each human life, and I truly believe that humans have a spark of divinity. I don't know where you stand on religion and God, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I truly believe that God exists, and in each of us there is a tiny spark of God. Yeah, we're made in His image, after all. And so, I truly believe that the potential for human creativity and ingenuity is virtually limitless. And it's
The,
such a waste. Yeah, I'm sorry, just one more. And
please go. Yeah.
it's just such a waste to me that so many people just live their lives subsisting, never trying to achieve anything, never doing anything important. They just want to get their next meal, scratch their balls, and go to sleep. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate having people I interact with who have that mindset because that's you're the accumulation of the people you talk to, the conversations you have, the
Yeah.
books you read,
Yeah.
and As far as God, I think that kind of falls into the same category as marriage and duty to your community and having children, where I don't know if it's true, but I know that people who believe it or have faith in it are happier. And
Mm-hmm.
in a pragmatic sense, I think that's what does everybody say when you ask, what do you want your kids to be when they grow up? And parents are like, I just want them to be happy. Um,
Right.
well, we know a lot of stuff that makes people happy, um, and you're not going to be able to use this thing to just. That's what when people try to make logical arguments. One of the funniest things to me is the debates with between theists and atheists, because I'm just like, Jesus wasn't out there debating. He
Yeah.
wasn't he was trying to do good works, and I think that's how you show, hey, I'm happy. That's one of my favorite things about,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm not in the LDS church anymore, but love hanging out with them. If I'm on the
Mm-hmm.
road, I'm traveling, and I'm lonely, I'll say, come play some chess with me, and we'll talk about, Jesus or the Bible or whatever, and it's a, it's
Mm-hmm.
always I've never left that kind of conversation not feeling better, and that's my compass.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Something I talk about fairly often is I stream from my church. I'm the president of my church congregation. We own this building. I stream from it. And for a long time, I was very much separated from the church. And I had a severe trauma in my life. Girl done me wrong, and I came back to God in a big way, and part of that ended up coming back to the church, and I have realized how incredibly important religion, or a better word perhaps would be spirituality, is in the human experience, because like you said, it's not a logical thing. Human is not a logical animal, and we know that for a fact because again, 80% of people are NPCs. People care a lot more about emotions than they ever will logic in mass. Of course, you get exceptions like Einstein and that kind of hyper exception. But the fact of the matter is that God-shaped hole that exists in 99.999999999% of people's hearts, they need to put something there. And putting a community that serves a greater purpose than, rampant hedonism is a good thing to fill that hole in your chest, I think.
If it works, it works, and that really is. There's research. People who have faith are happier, and you can try and parse it apart. But I think the big thing is just so many people are so miserable, and they're trying to think their way out of it. And emotional truth is real. And it's funny you mentioned Einstein, actually, because he part of his brilliance was in the simple. E equals mc squared is one of the simplest scientific formulas out there. You look at the formula for how light particles work, and it has all these triangles in it and stuff. But E equals mc squared is elegant, and he would spend time. He said he would spend hours a day
Mm-hmm.
with his mind quiet. Not He wasn't at a chalkboard a lot of the time. He would
Mm-hmm.
just sit there and be present with the world around him,
Mm-hmm.
and his creativity, that creative part of our mind, the feeling part of our mind. He says that's where his greatest scientific discoveries came from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that emotion exists for a reason. There was a time where that's all we had, rationalism. Who was, oh gosh, I think it was Nietzsche, or a philosopher, I think it was Nietzsche, who hated Socrates. And he said that Socrates did one of the greatest, most harmful things to the future of humanity that's ever been done. And it was an idea, and it was the idea of rationalism,
Yeah.
that we can just figure stuff out. We have all the knowledge inside of us, and if we can't rationally come to the conclusion using our brain, then it must not be true. And that's what killed God. And to Nietzsche, is that the God is dead thing is like when we're killing him, we're holding the knife. because of this insistence that we are the God, we are the greatest thing. This thing isn't that big, it's like a few pounds.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That if it can, yeah. Sorry, continue. Yeah. There you go.
I just choked out my own spit because I'm good like that.
Where are you guys located?
We're both. So she's from Mississippi, but she's currently with me. I actually, funny enough, I just recently looked at the back cover of your book and found out that we're both in Washington. So I was like, oh, that's kind of funny.
Where are you?
I'm in Tacoma.
I've been there plenty. I'm in Spokane.
Yep.
Nice.
Uh,
You have a friend.
I have 3 cats. I
Oh
have too
my
many. I have too many.
Oh, see, I'm a dog person. Ugh.
I love dogs, but it's a big commitment, and like,
Yeah,
one
I
day.
do. I
Yeah.
do. My dog is a pain in the ass.
Yes.
I absolutely know how big of a commitment those furry bastards can be.
Yeah, one day when I have, and it's like I wouldn't want to be a single dad. Like, if I had a dog, anytime I'm not with it and it's by itself, I'd feel bad.
Yeah.
So I want to have while I do have a good amount of free time right now, I'm spending it working on projects and that kind of thing and getting out of the house. But I'm gonna have to let you know when I'm out in Tacoma. I'd love to hang out or something, because not even that far away.
Dude, I'd be happy to grab a drink sometime. That'd be great.
That
The
would
3
be
of us,
awesome.
we could sit down, talk about writing or D&D or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh my! I forgot. This conversation's been so good that I almost forgot. We started talking about this
D&D?
stuff that
Of
Yes.
all things, I do want to... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, this is really off topic, but I was just gonna say I've daydreamed before, because I love DMing and I like writing campaigns.
Yeah.
I've daydreamed about starting like a Christianity themed campaign
Oh,
where you like
Really?
to learn. Yeah, like I have some ideas.
Yeah.
But you gotta have players. You can't just DM for yourself.
I would
Right.
absolutely love to do a campaign, man. It's been so long since I had a group to do a campaign with.
Dude.
I'd be stoked.
That would be awesome.
What's funny, one of the characters, I got one more thing for that, and then I want to ask a question for my chat. One of the characters in my books, my series, The Garden of Lies, The Garden of Hope, and the third book, The Finisher, is going to be The Garden of Fate. But one of the main characters, Amnes Lupine, she was my D&D character. She was my Pathfinder character. And I brought her right from Pathfinder to my books, and she's one of my favorite characters to write. Love that character so goddamn much.
When my first character died, I cried after like a year-long campaign, and my ex-girlfriend was in the group, and she was the reason he got killed.
Oh
and it caused a
no!
Is
that why
I'm
she's
leaving
an ex?
you. You killed my guy. We're done.
I had actually recently broken up with her, so I guess I need to carry some. I broke up with her like 2 weeks before that, and she was still in the D&D group, so I bear some responsibility. But Barsock, the gymnastic dwarf, I can't really put that on her.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Yes.
So one of the same chatter who's obsessed with immigration asks, asylum fraud. What is its role in trafficking? He's asylum fraud bad. So he's asking what asylum fraud's relationship with human trafficking is. Does it increase it? Does it play a role at all?
Yeah, that's not something I'm as familiar on, the inner workings of a lot of the more bureaucratic side of like immigration and that kind of thing. For me, my sphere of knowledge is really built around how transnational organizations transport humans across borders and sell them for money. And so that particular facet of it, I'm sure there's some degree that it's related to it. It's just not as much. Like I've definitely also focused more on the law enforcement side. Like I said, the scientific research I published was on using emerging technology to combat human trafficking, and so that was a lot of work into how we could look at data and metadata to create predictive algorithms that could actually give you heat maps of where you were likely to find human trafficking activity. Um, so that's interesting, though, and that's something I should probably look into more because it could be just another data point in that process.
Yeah, so this is speculation, but it's go with me on this train of logic here. My thought process would be that considering asylum, especially as it exists in the Western world right now, where asylum is pretty easy to get, I would think that claiming false asylum, especially if you're a trafficker, so that you have a foothold in the country, I would think that that would, at the very least, be extremely beneficial to trafficking organizations trying to set up a network. At the very least.
Yeah. You know, our border security is such a joke that most of the worst stuff is done outside of any official paperwork too. Like, not saying that shouldn't be addressed, just that you don't want your signatures on anything. You don't want that kind of paper trail.
Right.
But that that's more where I think it is in the big picture is just it is absolutely incredible. But like I said, if someone's committing asylum fraud, that's not good. It's fraud. It's the law. That's my side of it. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of the big time traffickers though. But maybe, like I said, I should do more research into that. It's just incredible. These issues are so big, and I try to really humble myself. There's so much I don't know.
I completely understand that. I try, and I will admit I often fail to be humble. I suffer from sometimes acting like I know more than I do. I'm trying to get better about that as I age. It's a slow going process.
I learned in the military, this isn't a good lesson, but I know it's not just the military, it's just a life lesson. I realized at a certain point that if you got asked a question and you didn't know the answer, you should pretend like you did, and then if you were wrong, you just apologize, but you might be right. It's very Machiavellian. And I don't do that anymore. I try not to do that anymore, but there is a strategic
value to it.
Machiavelli, yeah, where you're like, you might be right, but people will often, so it's I try to just be like, I'm not really sure. Let me get back to you.
And I can respect, but I mean, honestly, both of those paths are okay by me. Saying I'm not sure right out of the gate, or taking a guess at it, and if you're proven wrong, admitting fault, I'm okay with both of those, honestly.
Yeah, well, sometimes you don't
admit you're wrong.
Oh, that well, let's think. Sometimes you don't realize you know something until you start to talk. I know what that's like too. I think you and I both are communicators. Like we think in terms, like the first book. I wrote it by having a friend of mine who's a reporter, actually in Chihuahua. She interviewed me. She read my research and then interviewed me, and we recorded it, and then I transcribed that and edited that. And that
not a bad method.
For me.
Yeah.
Not a bad method.
Yeah.
So, I do have another question. This is actually from someone else, finally. And I know the answer to this because I've read your book, but I'm going to ask you so you can answer him directly. Is there a lot of human trafficking exiting the country?
It's mostly coming into the country, but going out too. Yeah, absolutely there is. That's people get taken and just shipped off. It's never seen again. It's really, really unfortunate. Nobody gets to tell themselves they're safe from this scourge. You can be more or less at risk, but we really gotta, educate ourselves and take care of first our families, and then our communities, then our nation, and then our species.
Yeah. Follow-up question from...
Oh, sorry, and one more thing. Sorry,
yes.
I hate it when I do that. Epstein being the biggest example, by the way, or the most famous. Mm-hmm. He was like there were girls and boys he abducted that were going to like upscale private New York City schools,
Mm-hmm.
shipped around the world. Yeah.
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 End of answer.
So, another question related to immigration. Based on your knowledge, correlation between immigration and crime in the country.
Oh boy. Overall crime rates and immigration. I think there's other indicators that would be more active. Like I said, I think we really need to have stronger screening for who comes in. You mentioned some of those statistics earlier about like men being 7 out of 10 violent crimes being committed by men and 6 out of 10 drug crimes being committed by men. And I think um, you can be looking at the wrong data points if you're just looking at immigration as being as making criminal activity worse or better. There's better data points to look at.
Such as, I'm curious.
Well, like I said, if we had systems for just saying, because one of these corrupt countries, even if someone's a criminal, you might not be able to tell. I think letting women and children under 13 is a really strong, even if you just said we're not going to let, it has to be a really specific circumstance. And that would make a lot less people be coming in via immigration, because you'd pretty much be excluding a lot of families if they didn't have, if it was, nuclear families versus just women or children who need assistance. But they're just not the primary ones who are committing criminal activity. I think we need to be smarter about how we do border security. We need a stronger border security. We need to make sure that people aren't slipping through the cracks and that we can be certain that we're not letting in people who are going to be a danger to the safety of the people in this country. So, certainly a lot of immigrant communities for the duration of this nation's history have been a source of a lot of criminal activity. I grew up in New Jersey and New York, and Italian communities, Irish communities. Immigrant communities they don't have the same root structures in their community, in the neighborhoods that they live in. They don't have the same attachment to different groups. They're more insular, especially when there's language barriers. And so, France is going through a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
In a few different countries in Europe. Especially, I think we have more in common with most Latin American cultures than any Western country does with Islamic cultures.
I agree.
That is a much tougher integration thing. I mean, even there's certain things. It's just it's we need to have less immigration until we can be certain that we're not putting our communities at risk, and it can increase risk of criminal activity.
I like that. I like your whole answer as a whole. There's a lot of nuance and it's very even-handed. I respect that. I also err on the side of having less immigration overall for various reasons. The economic impact on American citizens is a big one. I think that we need to try to naturalize the immigrant population that's here. I think there's been rampant immigration, and we're suffering a culture crisis because our culture has become so diluted. And that's just two of my big ones personally.
Well, I think, like I said earlier, my kind of dream future, if we can have the right filtration system, is that Kuwaiti model where you have citizens are like the Kuwaitis aren't concerned about losing their Kuwaiti culture because to be a citizen is something very special. They take it seriously. And they collect so much tax revenue from the legal immigration that they allow and monitor closely. That a few years, like in Kuwait, they'll give you like $10,000 for every kid you have if you're a citizen.
I wish we had that.
Yeah, they're like, please make more Kuwaiti babies, so we're gonna give you $10,000 if you're a Kuwaiti citizen for every kid you have. And that's what I like. I said, it's like I want the American premium package. And then the lower subscription tier for the people who we allow in and who can be naturalized properly and can The thing is, they're this model, the Kuwaiti model, which like I said, I want more people to know about, means that they're giving more than they're taking, and that benefits the citizens of that country. And if you don't have that, if you don't have it working out better for the people who are already here, then that's a model the current system will fail. It will collapse. It will be destroyed, and that's just human nature.
Yeah.
Agreed, 100%. Let's see. So
I like this. And none of my interviews do they pull a lot of my other feelings on stuff. And like I said, I usually try to avoid it, but I also think there needs to be space for people to say how they feel, and even if you disagree, there's people I disagree with on 90% of things, but I think they got one good take, or I appreciate how they approach things.
Yeah, that's something, I don't know how much you listen to him or if you pay attention to him at all, but Jordan Peterson talks a good deal about that, about separating wheat from chaff, both in listening to people and in reading. Someone might spew at you for an hour, and there might be one thing in there that's worth grabbing and remembering. And that might be 90% of your interactions. But if you grab the one thing worth remembering from all your interactions, you will, at the end of that, of course, be a much wiser and more knowledgeable person. Mm-hmm. And that's it. The problem, this goes back to what you said earlier, the problem with doing that is it takes a lot of patience.
Yeah, and emotional regulation, which I think our society has lost so much track of emotional regulation.
Yes.
Because we have like a cast. You know how if you have a cast, the muscles atrophy.
Yep.
We're soft, and so the military taught me a lot of emotional regulation, because I love my parents, but they're like just really chill, and that worked out for me. But I didn't really develop a thick skin until later.
Right.
But it's funny you mentioned Jordan Peterson, 'cause I was about to say actually that he's part of where I got that from, and now it also applies to him to a degree, because gosh, he gets into all these arguments online, and I'm like, don't talk to the trolls, man. Go work on a book or something.
I think there is interacting with the trolls has its place. If you can use an interaction with a troll to highlight why you're right, or to highlight the evils or the insanities of the other side, and then put that on display in a meaningful way, I think interacting with the trolls for that purpose is good.
You know what? I can respect that. I have become very averse. I'm not very. I also just don't love conflict. Like it's funny because I was a police officer. I remember this one time I was surrounded by like 20. I don't know. There were a bunch of different nationalities, like Iraqi and that kind of stuff. And I was trying to speak Arabic, and they were getting angry at me. And I was like, I was like really intense. And I was like, oh man, I was just trying to be friendly. And that was in the Middle East. And so I've been, despite being in these different jobs and that kind of stuff, I'm very much the person who tries to get everything like calm and smooth, and let's see where we can unite. And, but that part of why there's biodiversity, part of why there's different types of people, why there's extroverts and introverts, it's because we need different tactics and different tools for things to get better. And so we kind of do. That's a good point. Like, we need people who are going to go to the trolls and bring, those as teachable moments. And that's for me. And that's stuff I learned from too, because I read. I go out of my way as Jordan Peterson, who I'm a really big fan of. I did his self-authoring suite and read 12 Rules for Life. Looking at the stuff that we disagree with is important. I just remember the days where I used to have the long arguments, and sometimes they did work out. And now I just want to relax more. Like Matthew McConaughey. I want to Matthew McConaughey my way through the rest of my life as much as possible.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit too addicted to conflict. I like being able to, just take it easy and not butt heads with people. But I care so much about so many things, and I have my disposition does not allow me to back down when it's something I give a fuck about, and so I butt heads. I just do it a lot, and I can't help myself. I can't stop myself. So my main focus is learning how to do it in a way that's actually productive and effective.
Yeah, no, hey, you gotta weaponize. Like I said, I weaponize my narcissism with my birthday party fundraisers.
Yeah.
And I don't tell anybody it's a fundraiser until they're at my birthday party. So word of warning, if you get invited to my birthday party, I will solicit donations from you for a good cause.
Nice.
There's worse things to solicit someone for.
Right.
Like unsolicited goo.
Unsolicited goo.
I was gonna say bribes, but that's another.
Oh my
All right.
God.
So let's see. I should probably. I've been itching to get more writing in. I've been crushing it on the new book, so I should probably head out soon. So yeah, what else we want to cover? Anything else before we part ways?
I do have one more question from chat that I'll pose to you, and then I had one kind of silly but also semi-serious question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So let me read this again. Generally opposed.
Solicit the question. I'm soliciting your questions.
Unsolicited goo.
So, what do you think of funding foreign governments, such as Lebanon and Turkey, so that they have the resources and infrastructure to handle the flood of Muslims, so that Europe doesn't take it? And I'm gonna preface that. Well, actually, I don't want to pollute your take, Chris. I want to hear you answer, and then I'll answer.
Well, I want to start by saying that, like I said, I do strongly believe that I support the right of other people to be wrong. And that goes for nations, too. It's like, that's part of what makes our republic so special, is that the will of, ideally, less so lately, but the will of the people ideally guides policy.
Yeah.
And so it's like, France, and I can say, they're having trouble because of that. Should we give money to those countries? I mean, you can look at it from a budgetary perspective and say we are going to halt all immigration from these countries. We were spending this much money dealing with that. We're going to give half that amount to the countries that they're coming from and say, our hands are wiped. If you want to bribe yourselves, or do whatever with this, we're going to do this for another 3 years as a bit of a middle ground. Try and get your act together. I try to put things too, and kind of if it was family or friends or something, a way to be pragmatic and responsible while still protecting your literal and metaphorical boundaries. And so I think that you could probably come up with 100 different solutions, and maybe none of them would work. Maybe some of them would sound great. Maybe the ones that sound terrible would be the ones that work out. At the end of the day, it's the will of the people that should decide that. If people don't want immigration in their community, I respect their right for that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that last statement, absolutely, and most of your statement. My personal answer to that comment is that I think that as a policy idea, that specific idea is garbage, because here's what would happen. Lebanon and Turkey would say, yeah, we'll do that, and they'd take all of our money, and then they'd use that money to funnel more migrants to France and the UK.
Yeah, well, and like I said, that's, you gotta adjust aim. That was just me throwing out one idea, of course. That's probably the middle ground approach that most countries would take, and sometimes I can be a little bit establishment in my thinking. I think that's probably a lot of the Homeland Security and national security experts. That's the standard protocol. Beef up security. If this was simple to solve, there'd be a country that's doing it really well, and I'm not sure there's any country on earth that's doing a great job at this right now. Um, you know, so, but like this conversation's also prompted me to want to learn a lot more about immigration, um, as a subject, because I think, it definitely is one of the defining issues of our time.
Yeah.
Our borders, our boundaries, whether as individuals or as nations or as communities, are a big part of our self identity, our sense of safety and security, and so it's worth talking about.
It's absolutely worth talking about. And I think that there is a lot of innate crossover between immigration and human trafficking, obviously. And so I'm sure that you might be surprised, if I had to guess. I think you might be surprised at just how much those two things overlap in terms of what's good for one problem is good for the other problem.
Yeah, well, that's like I said, that's definitely my background. It's interesting to hear that perspective. My background, we spent a lot of time. I mean, working with Air Force Office of Special Investigations, talking, interviewing people from the Department of Justice. I definitely had and local police departments, like in Spokane. Um, I've gotten a much more establishment perspective on the problem and what can be done to address it. And so, taking down large scale criminal organizations that are doing a lot of the operations planning for this, figuring out where their income streams are coming from. That's more of the perspective that and the solutions that I've oriented myself with. Um, but I'm certain, just like everything else, there's you can. It's like with how housing prices have gone up and rent. Anyone who tells you there's one thing that's done it is either lying or really oversimplifying in a dangerous way. Uh, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think, obviously sometimes there's main contributors, but with stuff like the labor market and the housing market, those issues are too big for immigration to be at most. Immigration is 50% of the pie, and it's not that big. Let's be honest, it's not that big. It's probably closer to maybe 20% of the pie when it comes to the discussion about housing and the labor market. Yeah.
well, even if it's a big contributor, like I said, there's probably multiple ways to address these problems. And the one I think that I just know about, that's the path that I'm familiar with, is just going after these criminal organizations, figuring out who's running them.
And we should all be able to support
yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, like I said too, I try to stay away from like hot button political stuff whenever I can, because if I can get us to a solution that, what is it they say, perfect is the enemy of good. And so if I can get, lefties and you name it and that kind of stuff to unite behind passing some better laws that help us find the people who are doing bad things and put them away forever, that's still progress.
Yeah. And I can't argue with you on that being a high value approach, because punishing the wicked, as a Christian, I'm all for. And I think that that's one of those things that as a priority, it pays dividends, because when you lock up a bad person, it's not just that you're preventing them from doing any bad things. It's also that now the people that they would have victimized are able to be productive. So the benefit to society is unquantifiable in how positive it is to remove those high damage people from society.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely well said. And that's, like we were talking about earlier with the point of the justice system. And there are people who you should try to help. The point, they're in jail so that they'll stop being a risk to themselves or others, and turn them around. I think that's like a lot of drug offenders, is they have a problem that needs to be fixed, and once that's fixed, that'd be great for them to be productive in our society. And then there's people who need to be punished for having done something wrong, and that's why they're there more than anything. And then there's people who are never going to stop doing something wrong, and they either rot in a cell or get the death penalty. But that's nuance, and but nuance doesn't sell. That's
the
not
truth.
terribly marketable. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's not
nuance is a
marketable.
hard one. Only the 20% of people who aren't NPCs actually give a fuck about it.
Right.
Exactly.
Common sense is
Exactly.
not that common.
So, I want to wrap up by saying that in regards to what you just said about reforming people in prison, everyone should pay attention to this one. It's a lot easier to build strong, healthy men than it is to fix broken men who are already adults. Raise your kids and do a good job of it.
At least do the basics.
At least do
Come
the
on.
basics. Chris, I sincerely appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a great conversation. Like I said, open invitation for you to come back and discuss future projects. If there's a hot button issue that you absolutely need a soapbox to stand on about, you email me. We'll get it set up. Where can people find you? How can they support you? And closing comments from you.
Oh boy. Well, I have a website. It's Christopher ChristopherArmitage, Armitage, spelled like armitage.com. That's good. There's contact me and form on there. I really try to stay. I'm on Twitter a little bit, but I really try to stay off social media. I just if other people want to do it, but I feel like I'm happier when I spend less time on my phone. But yeah, there's a contact me page if you want to get a hold of me. Yeah, that's a big one. Check out my book, For Sex Trafficking: What It Is and How You Can End It. It's good. It provides some practical information and some history and some modern examples, and also the really actionable stuff that you can do to make a difference, and then you get to feel really good about yourself, which is nice. And yeah, that's the big stuff.
And your closing comments left me with a reminder of my final questioning, and this is cheeky but also literal. Isn't all sex trafficking forced? Like, why is the title forced sex trafficking when, like, force is kind of expected in the subject?
There is voluntary sex trafficking. There's gray areas in there related to and like there's people, for example, who are sex trafficked, who they are they have an abusive spouse, or abusive boyfriend, or that kind of thing, and so they believe they're doing it voluntarily. And then yeah, there's people also who just they choose like that is their chosen profession, and that goes to immigration where they're getting sent different places on purpose, and it's still illegal sexual trafficking. Just like labor, not all labor trafficking is forced labor trafficking. Some, those migrants who are working the fields, um, illegally are not being forced to do that. So just like there's labor trafficking that isn't forced labor trafficking, there's sex trafficking that isn't forced sex trafficking.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. And then
Also, I picked that title too because now if you Google forced sex trafficking book, my book's the #1 result, and I wanted to pick something that would have a good keyword optimization too.
Search engine optimization. Smart man. Fair enough. I got one final question from chat from you, and then we'll let you go. Should we legalize sex trafficking?
I want to be careful about prescribing those kind of answers because I really want, like I said, I think, if California wants to do something that way, that's their business. If Texas wants to do it, I can weigh in on what's right for me and my community, but I don't think something like that should be ordered top down by a world government or by even a federal United States government. I support the rights of communities to self-determine how they want to resolve their own problems. I want to empower the people who read the book to choose the answers they believe in regards to that, which there are specific answers in the book, but things like legalizing sex work, that in particular, that's the thing. I want to fight. I'm fighting for different ways to prosecute people who are doing bad things. Legalizing sex work, that's between you and your family and your community about how you want to approach that.
So I'll frame it in a different way then. If legalization of prostitution was on the ballot in your city, would you vote yes?
I promise I'm not trying to avoid it. It's just that there are so many specifics. There are so many specifics to me because, like,
He's
as
like,
a libertarian,
that question is coming. Dodge.
okay, here's a strong libertarian belief I have. If you own your body, you should be allowed to sell it because anything you own, you can sell. That is a belief I have. But like I said, that there's everybody's got to have their own views on it, but I think anything you own, you should be allowed to sell.
And that's a fair answer. I can live with that. And of course, I'm sure that you would agree there would be nuance to that, where there's circumstances where you can and can't, such as you can't be an adult and prostitute to minors. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Well, absolutely, and that's the thing is there's so many different ways of implementing a policy like that to make sure that it empowers the individual. And that's really, like I said, I have that libertarian vision of it. That's the rollout is important. You've seen that with a lot of like cannabis, for example, where some states have this super top-down controlling way of doing it, where they won't even let you grow a plant. And it's like, if you want to grow a plant in your house, that shouldn't be illegal.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And I would include that to be the cocaine plant.
I with drugs. Well, you mentioned drugs. I think that's the thing. If it's your property, and it's illegal to assault people. It's illegal to hurt people. It's illegal to rob people. And so I said with sex and with drugs, there have to be, and that's where the specifics come in, because it's like if you're shipping bricks of cocaine across the border, yeah, that's a danger to people. That's not okay. If you're growing a plant in your house, that's your business. That's your property. That's your domain. You own, just like I said about empowering localities. Your home is your domain. Your city is your city's domain, and you're a part of that. You're a smaller part, but your home is all of your part of that, and the states and the bigger part. And that's my view on those things. So hopefully I answered it enough.
I'm satisfied with that answer. I hope my chat is too. Like I said, I'm gonna let you get the hell out of here, man. I sincerely appreciate you coming on, and again, open invite to come back.
Yeah, and hit us up if you want to hang out IRL.
Yes, and I want to check out. You said you both wrote books, right?
So she is currently working on getting. She has 2 books that were published, and we depublished them when I found glaring issues.
Well, yeah.
And but she's working on getting the 3rd out, and that one is going to be right this time.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, hey, I would love if you send me links. I want to read your books.
I would love that.
One book each.
Do you like
audiobooks?
audiobooks? Each. Do you like audiobooks?
Yeah, I like audiobooks.
Okay, if you can tolerate some crude humor and a fair amount of background commentary, my book is free on my YouTube channel.
Oh, well, but also I'm willing to purchase it too. But I'll check it out. Can you send me a link or something at least?
I will make sure to do that. Yes.
Not to make you do too much work. I love when people are like, "Oh, I want to read your book. Will you mail a copy to me for free?" And I'm like,
"It's like,
oh yeah,
what?"
Right. It's like, yeah. I don't need to eat, you prick.
Yeah, like $10 in shipping, and it's like, get out of here. So anyway, if you just send me a link, I absolutely am looking forward to that. And between D&D and good fantasy fiction and politics and that kind of stuff, I definitely know we're all going to talk a lot more.
I look forward to it, man. We appreciate you being here. We hope you have a great night.
Take care, guys.
You too.
Alrighty.
Nice.
I feel like that was a great interview.
Yeah. Feel like we made a new friend.
Well,
awesome.
That was Chris Armitage. His book is Forced Sex Trafficking. I will have his website and a link to buy the book linked down in the description. I sincerely appreciate everyone who was in the live chat feeding questions, and I sincerely appreciate everyone who watches this video back on YouTube and Rumble. Hit that sub button. Links to support are down in the description. Go support Chris. Do something about human sex trafficking. human trafficking in general. Donate to a charity, email your politician, do something about it. It's kind of, the right thing to do. And in the meantime, stay free. Welcome to the adventure.